Guilbeau Center for Public History. Before we start, I'd like to thank my colleagues who've been sort of running this program, Liz Skilton and Marissa Petru, who've been my co-directors at the Guilbeau Center, and Summer Abu Kamra and Julia Fontenot, who are the graduate students who've done much of the logistics and arrangements and given us found some of our great speakers for us. After this week, we'll have 2 more talks the next 2 Fridays at the same time at 1 o'clock. Next week, Aaron Cowan, a professor of history at Slippery Rock University in Pennsylvania, will come and talk about grant writing for smaller institutions. He's had a huge amount of success raising funds for public history projects himself. And then the following week, our final talk will be Stephen Sloan from Baylor and their Oral History Institute, talking about the importance of oral history. So with that, I'll turn that over to my colleague, Dr. Marissa Petru.
Thank you, Dr. Guilbeau. So as many of you know, one of the research agendas of the Center for Public History is to develop land acknowledgement guidelines. So before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the 24 tribal nations of Louisiana, and we would like to pay our respects to their tribal elders, past, present, and future, for stewarding this land so that we can carry out the work that we have planned for today. The Center is continuing to work on developing guidelines for cultural and educational institutions, and for consulting with us, we would like to thank Lenore Curall of the United Hmong Nations, Dr. Linda Langley of the Coushatta Tribe, and Mackay Northup of the Massachusetts Pequot, and Donna Skiers of the Dene and Ojibwe Nations, and Greg Smoke of the Center for the American West. If any of you, as always, are looking for more information, and if any of you are interested in guiding us on developing these guidelines, we look forward to speaking with you about it. Now I will turn things over to Summer Abu Kamra.
Thank you all for being here. Our speaker today is Preston Huff from the National Archives. He's been in the archives and records management field for over 40 years. He's been with the National Archives and Records Administration for nearly 17 years and with the federal government for 20 years. He is currently in the office of the Chief Records Officer. Previous to his current role, he was the National Archives Regional Administrator in the Southwest region, which included the 4-state area of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Preston oversaw the 3 main areas of a region, including the regional archives, records management, and the Federal Records Center. So thank you very much for being here, Preston.
All right, I hope everybody can hear me well. Having a microphone kind of helps in this particular situation. And you're brave souls. You have signed up for a 3-hour session here. You get a 15-minute break in there, so you'll get some relief out of this long session. The intent is, and I'm going to cover a lot of information here. It's going to be like drinking from the fire hose, as they say. But if you have any questions, and there will be opportunity at the end of this to ask your questions. But the last slide will have my contact information. And I do welcome any questions that you might have. So you'll have my telephone number. It is my government cell phone number. And you'll have my email address there. And by all means, don't walk out of here without any of your questions taken care of. As I think I'm going to cover a lot of stuff. It may not seem like I'm doing it fast because there's so much, but some of it you may think I'm kind of glossing over, and it's going to lead to some confusion about certain parts. So, as we get started, I want to talk about the focus of this lecture. And the way that this is set up is the topic for the lecture series, Archives in Crisis, which I like. As I started preparing for this, I started the title, Archives in Crisis. And I realized many of my past presentations were also called Archives in Crisis. And I've given this before, but even in a conference in China, in Qingdao, China, back in 2010, I think it was, or 2011. What did they name the conference? Archives in Crisis. So, you're very familiar. But we're going to be talking about it in two ways. One is we're going to be talking about emergency planning for disasters of all kinds, whether they be human-caused or natural. The result is often the same. So I'm going to hit on a variety of disasters. I'm going to have some case studies. I'm going to have some show and tell. And then, and I like this because Summer and the conference organizers threw this in here, and it's something I believe in. And that is the topic of what is called silent disasters. And these are the ones that you don't know are happening, but they're just, can be just as bad. We're talking about insect damage, water leaks, overhead pipes, sprinkler heads that leak, that kind of stuff, storage issues, and then we're going to talk a little bit about land loss. Now, this is very important here in Louisiana. So what I'm going to cover, I'm going to talk about what NARA, and it's one of the first things I want to do. When I first came to the National Archives and Records Administration, that's our real name. And everybody's talking about NARA, 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 NARA. What is NARA? It's the National Archives and Records Administration. And often I go and talk to different places and they say, what is NARA? What is that you talk about? So I want to set that up because you will hear me talk about NARA. And I'm a Fed, so Feds like to use lots of acronyms, lots of initials and that kind of stuff. If it doesn't make any sense, please raise your hand and just let me know. So I'm going to cover what NARA, what our response role is, and other sister institutions, sister organizations. Because we're not all about responding to the federal government and the big bureaucracy and all the federal agencies. We do that. That's part of my job. But also, especially since Katrina in 2005, we have been trying to help non-federal entities, the museums, the historical societies, the libraries, the special collections of the libraries, colleges, universities, all kinds of tribes, state archives, municipal archives. So most of what I'm going to be talking about is non-federal organizations, non-federal responses, not the federal part. We got plenty of that as well. And as I said, I'm going to use some examples of the disasters that I've been involved in. As Summer said, I've been doing this now for 40 plus years. So I've seen quite a bit. I didn't see anything yet until Katrina hit. And then I got involved in Katrina and our response. I was the point of contact for the National Archives. I was here the week before Katrina hit at the Society of American Archivists conference. Had a nice conference, enjoyed New Orleans. And then August 29th hit, and it changed everything. And then suddenly, I was the point of contact on behalf of the National Archives because Louisiana was one of my 4 states. And it was Preston to go down to New Orleans and try to help out with what's happening there, and Mississippi. So I was in both areas. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the disasters. Not just Katrina, but Katrina's going to be a big one. Takeaways. Things that at the end of this 3-hour lecture that you should have is a better understanding of the federal government and what our role is in response and recovery to disasters. And I'm going to give you some sources of information, both in pre-disaster planning, which is so important, preparation, and the response, and then the unfortunate part of the recovery. And I want to convey, if I don't cover this later on, I want to get it right now, is that you are not alone. There's a lot of professionals out there, a lot of caring, knowledgeable people in various organizations that stand ready to help in any way that they can. So you're a part of the community when these things happen that you can tap into. And one of the ways is, how do you pay for it? That's always an issue. So what are some of the sources of funding? FEMA can't do it all. I have worked enough with FEMA. They're my buddies, but they can be frustrating too. They don't pay for everything all the time. So you gotta look at other sources of funding, and I will touch on that. First, I need to do a little bit of a commercial about what the National Archives is and what it has. And this will be quick, I promise you. But just to kind of give you a sense of how big it is. You know, people call us, they call us Smithsonian Nations Attic, but they also call us the Attic as well. But we have some 5+ million cubic feet. Cubic feet is 10 by 12, 19. That's a cubic foot. So we have over 5.5 million, or 12.5 billion with a B, pages of permanent paper records, analog records. And it's growing exponentially. So that number is probably 6 million by now. And of course, we're getting into electronic information, electronic records. So we have over 795 terabytes of permanent electronic records. There's more than that in temporary electronic records. We're talking about permanent electronic records. So that kind of begins to give you some insight into where things are going. Kind of transitioning from a paper environment. By gosh, we're just getting it right. All these years, we've been managing paper records for so long, and we felt like we were getting it down pretty good. And the cheese moved, so to speak, and now it's increasingly about electronic records. And because we have presidential libraries, we manage 14 presidential libraries, from Hoover to Obama Presidential Center. We have over 700,000 artifacts or objects that we're managing as well. And the Record Center program throughout the nation, we have some 28 million cubic feet of other agencies' records. These are not NARA records that we are providing a service for. So these are the federal record centers across the nation, Pacific to the East Coast, from almost Canada all the way down to Fort Worth. That's the closest one around here. So the Fort Worth Federal Record Center is one that would house the federal records of that 4-state region: Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And that's why I have a connection to Louisiana, because I was the regional administrator and dealt with this area quite a bit. We have 44 facilities throughout the nation. That includes the presidential libraries and those federal record centers and other locations. But we're probably best known as the agency that preserves the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the U.S. Census. If you're into genealogy in particular, that's very important. Yes, sir.
Okay, so do y'all kind of work with the Library of Congress?
Good question. A lot of people, including our Congress, often think that we're the one and the same. Or the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian is another one. Smithsonian is organized differently. It's not a part of us. It's not affiliated closely with us, and certainly not organizationally. And Library of Congress is under the legislative branch. So they are a collecting agency. A fantastic, always, Smithsonian, Library of Congress, and the National Archives, of course. Fantastic holdings, very interesting. Ours, for the most part, are government records, whereas the Library of Congress may have manuscripts that they've collected of different figures, or maybe some of the older presidential records. Keep in mind, Presidential Records Act came along, and we started the presidential library system with Hoover. So before that, who had those records? Either universities or the Library of Congress, in most cases. So we call them sister institutions. We deal very closely with them. All right, here's our facility, downtown Washington, D.C. This is our, well, this is what people think of usually when they think of the National Archives. It was built in 1936. The agency was established 2 years before that, 1934. So it comes out of the WPA. And it kind of looks like a WPA era type building, as many of the ones in DC are. Informally, we call this A1, Archives 1. Not real ingenious. And I'll talk about another facility we got that happens to be A2. But that's A1. When you hear an NARA person talking about going to A1, this is the facility that they're talking about. We also, there's a little insight here, inside the National Archives, we call this the mothership. So when we're going back to A1, sometimes they'll be flipped and say, oh, I'm headed back to the mothership. And we know exactly where they're going. And also, sometimes NARA folks refer to themselves as Nartians. So the Nartians are going back to the mothership. But that's a beautiful facility. That's where we have the rotunda. That's where if you're going to see the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Magna Carta from 1297, which is on loan. We don't have that because that's not a federal record from the United States. It's been collected, and the person that owned that has put it on display in the rotunda at the National Archives. If you ever get a chance, when you're back in Washington, I highly recommend standing in line, although it's very hot in downtown Washington in the summertime, but to go through that. I'm fortunate in that many times I've had meetings in meeting space just off the side from the rotunda, and I get to come out from time to time and walk out onto that space, and it just is so special to look at what we call our charters of freedom, and to go over and look at those and say, wow, that's why we maintain original documents. And there's a power that's associated with looking at those. It's just incredible. We put a lot into the protection, the preservation of those documents. That's a whole different presentation, but very interesting. So I want to give that a little bit of a commercial about that. Our next facility is even bigger than that facility. We kind of outgrew the one downtown. So we put together this facility, and it was dedicated back in 1994, and this is referred to as A2, Archives 2. And I'll be back there next week. So it's kind of our headquarters. When we go back, that's where most of our meetings are held, not at the other facility. The other facility, yes, it does have records, but it's becoming more of a museum, more ceremonial. The Archivist of the United States, that's where his office is. And the worker bees in the DC area, most of them are at A2. So these are not two different facilities. You see the two pictures here, it's the same facility. The second picture, the one on the right, I just wanted to convey how big this place is. So it not only has records, but it has all the staff, digitization, all that kind of stuff, meeting space, etc. Research rooms. They're quite a facility. And then you have the presidential libraries. As I said, we have 14 presidential libraries and presidential centers throughout the nation, from Hoover to President Obama. And Texas by the way, has the most. We have 3. And I'm sorry, but 2 of the pictures of presidents are not on here. I couldn't find an updated slide, so I don't have pictures of the 2 that are missing. There's George W. Bush, or Bush 43. So his presidential library is in Dallas. And then President Obama in the Presidential Center in Illinois. So Texas has George H.W. Bush in College Station at Texas A&M. You have George W. Bush in Dallas, and you have the LBJ in Austin. And of course, I've been to all of those. And this is the facility in Fort Worth. And again, the purpose of this facility is to house the federal records of the agency customers that are from Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And you see the dedication in the upper left-hand corner there, and then the gray-haired guy that's speaking to you now is right there, the third from the right. And we have a congressman there on the left, and Mayor Moncrief of Fort Worth. There's a third from the left. Anyway, the point is, it's a big deal at the National Archives when you dedicate one of these facilities. It's a 210,000 square foot facility, stores 1.1 million cubic feet of records. Most of them are temporary records. At some point, they'll be disposed of, and the agencies pay us to take care of their records, to store their records, and to provide reference services to them, and ultimately disposition. But we also have archival records at this location. I'll talk about that in just a second. That is the lobby there at the very bottom. I was fortunate I got to oversee the design and construction of this place, so that was quite fun. And the little details, we kind of made it kind of Texified there in the lobby. There you see kind of a horse theme, a Western theme there, which they allowed us in Washington. They didn't understand it, but they liked it, and we said, go for it. You had it in the budget, it was fine. And there you see some of the staff there on the lawn in front of the facility there in Fort Worth. The building, again, is a 210,000 square foot building. It's on 14 acres, and we dedicated that back in 2007. And as far as permanent records, there is a bay at that location, temperature, humidity controlled, better security even than what we have for the rest of the place, or more limited access, I should say. It has about 120,000 cubic feet of some of the best records that you can imagine. And we have over 100 federal agencies that store records at this facility. I wanted, since I'm talking to a Louisiana group, I wanted to include some Louisiana records that we happen to have in the National Archives in Fort Worth. Now, in Washington, we've got a lot more, but locally, up there in Fort Worth, these are some of my favorites. And this one is a district court record, a docket in New Orleans. And they went into recess in 1814, and the reason is in that little bit of text there, and you probably can't read it, it's small, and the little script there is the handwritten script. It says basically the British are coming. You know, so we've got to recess. We've got to get out of here. And we'll be back. That's basically what that little comment says. So I got a chuckle when I saw that. This is one of my all-time favorites, because it really tells you what's going on in our history in this region. Another one of my favorites, because the folks in Washington used to sometimes say, you're out there in Texas, you don't have some of the older important records like we had back in Washington, the Constitution, Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and all that kind of stuff. And said, yeah, but we've got Lincoln documents, Jefferson's. Yeah, Jefferson, that's so early. It's because of New Orleans. It's because of Louisiana. So this one happens to be written by the President, President Jefferson, informing the Mississippi Customs Collector, Mr. Trist, that he now has jurisdiction over Louisiana. This was 1803. because the Louisiana Purchase. So Louisiana Purchase happened, that was $15 million. Oh my gosh, now we gotta pay for this. So one of the first actions is President Jefferson saying, Trist, Louisiana's your area, collect money. So we gotta pay for this. And that record resides at Fort Worth. Another one of my favorites is a little bit more recent. That's General Beauregard, but before he was general, he was the appointed superintending engineer at the New Orleans Customs House, that beautiful place downtown. And it's a position that he held over 10 years. And at the time, it was one of the largest buildings in all of North America. Well, he was very political, as you know. Ran for mayor of New Orleans, not successfully, but always had his toe in politics. So, looking through the Customs House records and his records in Fort Worth, we came across a little bit of idle activity, shall we say, where he and a colleague were looking at the upcoming 1860 presidential election, and they listed all the states and predicted which states were going to go for who. So I think it was Bell, Douglas, Lincoln, Breckinridge, I think that's what it was. Well, he made his prediction, and he said Douglas was going to win, but he was wrong, of course. But that's what the doing is. And it's also kind of interesting because he changed his predictions in some of the states. So you can see where he marked it out and said, no, I'm going to go with, I think they'll go in this direction. But gave us a little bit of insight into Beauregard. And what was he thinking? And it really kind of goes along with him being a very political creature. All right, now we're going to talk about something totally different. And that's really the gist of what we're here to talk about. And that's archives and crisis and disasters. And I wanted to kind of bring it home. Not all these disasters, of course, are going to be Louisiana, but they're in our region. They're in our area. First, we're going to talk about Galveston, just to mention it. It is the largest natural disaster in U.S. history, and we don't have its exact numbers because of the time. 1900, you can imagine. You know, this hurricane, they didn't have predictions about it coming, it hit. And an estimated 6,000 to 12,000 people, depending on what source you look at, lost their lives. It was very devastating to Galveston. So that is kind of the gauge. That's the big one of all time. And then we had a whole host of other kinds. Started getting into human cause. 9/11, of course, that was up in New York and Northern Virginia, Pennsylvania. But this one is Oklahoma City. Again, that's in my 4-state region. So 1995, the Murrah Federal Building, Oklahoma City, suffered that bombing. 168 people killed, 800 injured. And by the way, all of these involved some level of destruction of records and information. It doesn't get included here because we're focused on the big picture of the people. That's all important. It's the people, our lives, facilities, very important. But I can tell you, all of these had some damage or destruction of records and information, as you can imagine. Fort Worth, year 2000, F2 tornado hit, killed 5, injured 100. Congresswoman's couch was sucked out of the building. FBI had to go out to the countryside to try to find some of their records. So obviously quite an impact at that location. 2010, we had a disgruntled individual who flew a small plane into the IRS building in Austin. In addition to causing that fire that you see there, killed 2 people and injured 4. So human cause is getting to be something that you're seeing more and more, unfortunately. And then there was 2005, with Hurricane Katrina. And as I said, Galveston was the big one, with 6,000 to 12,000 people being killed. Hurricane Katrina, by most estimates, 1,800 plus deaths. And Hurricane Maria, 2017, in the Caribbean is estimated at some 3,000 plus deaths, although that number has changed over a period of time, from a low up to now the more accepted 3,000 plus. So the scale of Katrina led us in the federal government to pay more attention to the importance of records and information and the need for agencies and communities, cultural, historical organizations to plan and incorporate this area into an emergency response. I can tell you, Katrina is when I began to deal a lot with FEMA, GSA, General Services Administration, because GSA is the landlord of all the federal agencies, or almost all the federal agencies in a region. And their intelligence in terms of what's going on the ground is quite good. So we began to work very closely together, and over I heard them say about us, wow, we didn't know records and information and the archives and all that was important. And we, in those organizations, don't know much about this stuff. Thank goodness there's NARA to rely upon to help us out with this. And we continue a close working relationship to this day. So Hurricane Katrina led to greater NARA advocacy for the importance of records and emergencies within our own agency. We got really focused on, we need to do more about this, because when Katrina hit, what did we do first? We began to check federal agencies. How did federal agencies fare? Did they do okay? And most federal agencies did relatively okay. There was some areas that got damaged, but it was the localities, the parishes, the towns, the cities, the libraries, places like that that were suffering quite a bit of damage. And we'll talk about this in greater detail. Greater awareness at the highest levels of government. I'm talking about locally in the governor's office. They became a lot more aware about archives and records, all the way to the White House. I was on numerous telecons where we had all these agencies, NGOs, and non-government organizations, local government, emergency planning, Louisiana, etc. And you had the White House on these calls. And it was amazing when somebody would speak up and say, hey, this is such and such from the White House. How are we doing with recovery in New Orleans? It's like, wow, I've never heard that before. So we certainly, because of Katrina, we got more and more awareness in that respect. More awareness of the importance of essential and historical records by the emergency-focused agencies. That's really FEMA is the main one that we think of when we talk about emergency response. Department of Interior has a role in this as well. And they certainly got more and more involved with it. And this is good. This is relevant to people in the room. And that is, we're doing a lot better, I think, with more coordination and collaboration with the non-federal entities, non-federal agency entities, including the states, the tribes, and state and local governments. And NARA's interest was, back then in 2005, and it is, of course, the protection of records and information, especially permanent records, regardless of the format, paper, computer generated, whatever the case may be. So, Orleans Parish suffered a lot of damage when Katrina hit. Mission assignment came to the National Archives from FEMA. FEMA said, this is not us. We don't know how to recover damaged records. NARA, would you oversee this? And Orleans Parish had a lot of damaged records, and we got that mission assignment to go down there and take care of it. So we put together an estimate of how much it was going to cost, and the recovery of just the paper records was $1 million in 2005 money. And it was actually more than that when we ran into computer records, hard drives, that we didn't anticipate. And we had to amend that mission assignment to include that as well. So we, the National Archives, we got the money, now we've got to recover. And we obtained the services of a professional records recovery company from New York to do this. They were tried and true, they've done this before. It's a niche market, a niche area, but several of them know what they're doing. So we contracted with them to do that. And then early 2005, Katrina hit August 29th. Water had to recede before we could get in there and start pulling these records out. Early November, we started doing that. I had to wait until the records were down. It was still damp. It was still soggy in that area we were working in. But we're talking about the Orleans Parish Courthouse. That's where these particular records were. There was more damage than that one location. But this is the one that we got that $1 million mission assignment to take care of. The records we're talking about included the clerk of the criminal court, the coroner's office. They were in the courthouse, Orleans Parish Courthouse, and the district attorney's office, which was across the street. So those three areas. Now we're getting into the show and tell, into the pictures. So I hope you can tell there what you're looking at. It's kind of tough because the National Guard guy has camouflage on, and it kind of blends in with the records a little bit. Why is the National Guard guy helping us? Because they were providing security at the courthouse, and they were bored, and they saw we were working with these records, and they said, can we help? And they started helping us move stuff out of the way, because we had to clear paths so we could get to the damaged records. So these guys are moving out some cabinets so we can get to the, we didn't ask them to do it, they just volunteered, and they were great. So that is in the coroner's office, as I recall. And there you see the water line in this particular room that we estimated. It's right about where the pencil sharpener is on down. They're on the first floor. Some would call it a basement, but I guess in New Orleans it's the first floor. And you see above the water line, the records are still on the shelf, but they're damaged because of the mold, because of the humidity. Very, very humid. So damaged records above, mold covered, but what happened down below, they just washed off the shelves. So that's what you're walking on when you walk in that room with the records that had been below the water line. So you got a little bit of order with the records above. They're damaged, but they're in order. What happens down below? They're everywhere. So that's a lot tougher to recover those. And just kind of, these are in good order compared to some of the others. This is a file cabinet, a file drawer rather. And somehow, whether somebody pulled it out or what, when we arrived, it was sitting out there on the floor. And you can see what the records look like. I almost wish you could do a little scratch and sniff on the screen, because it was horrendous. You can imagine anything in that. All kinds of stuff was in the water, as you all know. Petroleum, sewage, dirt, you name it. It was unique. It was bad. So on the left here, another room, you see damp, moldy books, wet records that are in the drawers, and you look at that one drawer, you see it's kind of bowing out. So what happens when records get wet? They expand. And when they expand, even a metal cabinet can't hold them without bending. So that's what's happening on this one drawer up here. And of course, everything rust. And then on the right, those are white walls. They're supposed to be nice, pretty white walls. But that's mold on the walls. It's more gray than it is white. And you see the cabinets all rusty. What a mess. So here's the staff of the document recovery company. Most of them in the good Tyvek. That's what we like when we do disaster recovery, is to have good Tyvek and mask, and they have helmets, because sometimes you get into areas where stuff falls down when you move records. So they're pulling the records out for triage. Now, again, if it's above the water line, triage is easier. If it's below the water line, triage is hard. So in their system, they even recorded when they moved the records, if it was above the water line or if it was below the water line. That tells us they're in better shape if they're above the water line than below. If they're below, there's probably not much order in those records. They're going to be recovered, but somebody has to go through and put them back in order. So what the document recovery company did, what they do all the time, and their competitors, is not only do they pull the records out, but they take them to a specialized facility to have them vacuum, freeze dried. It pulls out all the moisture out of the records. These records are still damp, by the way. This is in the first week of November. Katrina hit August 29th. So they're still damp. So you vacuum, freeze dry them, and you irradiate them, because you're trying to kill the mold spores. Nothing is 100%, but that's the best that we can do with getting rid of the mold spores. Then you have to clean them, and that's brushes, HEPA vacuuming, and erasers, dry erasers, eraser crumbles, and again, more brushes. Then you put them into new folders, relabel, put them in boxes for the return back to New Orleans for continued use. The amazing thing, as far as we know, we did not lose records in that location. I think that's pretty amazing when you see the conditions of that place. And here's some examples. This is during the triage. This is during they're on site in Orleans Parish, rehousing, putting them in boxes, just so you can carry the things to the truck. And you can see what the water does, the damage. You see the file cards over here, how they're arched. That's because they're wet and they expand. So they have no place to go. They start contorting. And then in the lower left-hand corner, the surprise for us, when we were doing this, they came up and said, well, what about the computer records? We said, well, you're all backed up. I mean, yeah, sure, you're mirrored site and all that. No, we're not. So what's on the C drive is our records, our information. These are essential records. These are very important for the prosecution of individuals that have done bad things. So we amended the contract, went with another vendor as a part of this contract to recover the hard drives off of those computers that you see there. Out of 20 computers, we were able to recover data off of 5 of them. When you consider that these computers have been underwater for 2 months, that was pretty good. All right, and then this is some of our staff. It's Kathy Ludwig from Preservation on the left, helping go through some of the records and throwing cabinets away. Hillary Kaplan from Preservation over on the right. It's the shorter of the two. And John Smith, who was my records management director, who worked for me, who participated in this. So And then one other person, you'll see her picture in just a minute, is Barbara Rust from Fort Worth. She's an archivist. She became an archivist. She probably never thought she was going to be cracking into computers, towers, to get to hard servers, or to hard drives rather. But that's what we had her do down there. So our 4 staff that were overseeing directly the day-to-day operation of this recovery, 2 were from preservation. These were conservators, preservation programs from College Park, A2, back in Washington. They came out for this. And 2 of my staff, 1 records management, 1 archives. In total, just in the preservation group, over 182 staff days to support this recovery. And that doesn't include my staff's time out of Fort Worth, and my time, and a couple other people that were contributing to this as well, out of the Baton Rouge JFO, Joint Field Office. The point is, recovery is extremely expensive, and it's better to be prepared for it to begin with. If these records had been located elsewhere before Katrina, they may have been damaged a bit, but they wouldn't have been submerged in the water. So when you do risk analysis of your facilities, when you put together disaster plans, think about those kinds of things so that you don't have this huge effort to recover them. Extremely expensive. All right, a bit more, talking about the record swelling. And this big hefty guy here using salt to get into cabins. Who would think that you can't get the records out of the cabins because the records have swollen? So you see what is left. You have a lot of debris left over when you cut the records out of these things. National Guard helping us out again, remove all the debris, and just stacked it up in front of the courthouse. And they came along with the big 2.5 trucks. They threw it in the back of the trucks. They took it to, I think it was a school parking lot across the way, and dumped them over there. And we had to do this several times. This is just a part of the mountain. And organization is absolutely the key. Knowledge, experience, organization. Organization is one of the big ones. So you have to have some order. You have to have the records into the proper boxes, even just to get them to the recovery place in New York in this particular case. Barcoding to track it, to keep up with it. Keeping records in the original order as much as possible, crucial. And we had to recover 5 tractor-trailer loads of such records. That's one of the trailers right there. So 5 fully loaded trailers, not including these computer hard drives, of course. And there, Barbara Rust is hard at it, working on a good hot day there. And she's on the dock there of the front area, I guess it is, of the district attorney's office. And she's cracking open the servers to get to the hard drives. In the background, you can see the damaged cars that were abandoned there because they were flooded. They have the familiar rings of contaminated water. I've had people look at that picture and say, there was lots of people there that day, weren't there? You know, those were abandoned cars, and you do not. Outreach, extremely important in these things. Why? The community wants to know what's going on. We had drop-bys. The mayor dropped by, other officials. We had people that would stop, come out off the street and say, what are y'all doing? What is this? Why? They're citizens of this area and they want to know what's going on. So we worked with the media quite a bit. The archivist was pretty savvy. That's the archivist in the tie there, Dr. Weinstein. He came out and he had us lined up to talk to the press in various locations. By the way, we started our tour when he was here in Mississippi over on the Alabama state line, and we went all across the ocean front in Mississippi, all the way over to Baton Rouge, talked to history professors in Baton Rouge, and then came down to New Orleans and spent a couple of days here. And here, it just shows you, there you got the media. You got CNN, and you got Fox News there that are shooting everything we were doing there and trying to get an idea so they could broadcast it to our communities and let people know what was happening down there. Letting in the pink, fuchsia, purple. I'm almost colorblind, so I'm not sure what that color is. She's a reporter for CNN. And she tried to mic me up, and I said, no, the guy with the tie, he's the guy that you need to mic up. He's very soft-spoken. So when she mic'd him up, they had him in front of a generator, and they couldn't hear him. So they had to go to Plan B. You'll hear Plan B in just a little bit for an on-camera interview. But it's very important to deal with the media. You have to think about that in your plans as to who's going to be your front person, who's going to be speaking on your behalf of what's happening. All right. Getting ready to take a break, but first, I want to take you to my footage. Not my footage, CNN. This, and let me set it up a little bit. This footage, about 6 minutes. 6 minutes between here and your break. CNN, saw the reporter there and they had the footage. They played this on November the 11th, 2005, and it's about the National Archives helping out in Orleans Parish. I think the short footage, even though it's damaged, it's getting old. It doesn't have sound about the first 5 seconds or so, and it kind of jumps and pixelates, so bear with me. Then when it gets into it, I think you're going to see better than the pictures of what the recovery really looked like at Orleans Parish and what we had to deal with. You will see me in there with, we have a tour going through the courthouse, looking at the bed, all looking thoughtful and like we are doing something other than pointing to stuff. I'm in kind of a beige pants and a beige color shirt with that mask and headgear and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I kind of point out who I was in this. And you'll just, I think you'll just get a better sense of what this is all about. As soon as we're finished, then we're going to go to our 15-minute break, and then we'll come back from that, and we're going to start talking about recovery in the Caribbean and my mission assignments down there. So here we go. I hope it works fine.
Yesterday. And the analogy fits. Court staff in New Orleans have to wear masks and protective gear to go to work now. And their immediate task in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, trying to literally salvage justice. The moldy documents, bags of waterlogged evidence, and racks of rusty guns are critical to criminal cases. Staff from the National Archives are helping the court staff piece together the evidence right now. The woman who's heading up the effort is Kimberly Williamson Butler, Clerk of Criminal Courts for Orleans Parish. Kimberly, great to see you.
Kira, thanks for having me.
Well, I guess we should sort of set the stage for a moment and just tell our viewers exactly what was in that basement.
Well, everything from baseball bats to cocaine and anything that was retrieved from a home, purses. There's everything from drugs to weapons to articles that were used in criminal or confiscated in criminal cases.
So have you been able to see what is salvageable and what is not with regard to records and evidence? Were you able to save everything?
Well, I can tell you that we didn't lose anything in terms of physically losing evidence. One of the things that I mentioned that I was concerned about was that nothing floated away. That we know. So we have every article of evidence. The question now is what condition are they in? And something that's actually even more critical is whether or not we can retain those property intake records. The intake records actually identify what's in those bags.
So let's say, for example, you're able to salvage a gun, but the gun got wet. Are you
Yes.
still able to use that gun in a case as evidence against an alleged murderer?
Well, again, I'm neither judge nor jury, but when I spoke with the chief judge, he told me that it doesn't matter if the gun's rusty, if you can't use it, as long as I can produce that weapon, then it can be admissible in court. So I'm encouraged by that, but I'm even more encouraged by the Dr. Weinstein, who's he's the U.S. archivist. They took time out of his busy schedule to come and meet with us yesterday. He said that he believed we were going to be able to retain and restore every record, and that means that I'll be able to identify the actual bags, and the evidence tags for the most part were in place with the cases that they're allotted to.
So
now, I think yes.
No, that's okay, go ahead.
Well, one of the things I mentioned that I was concerned about is the drug evidence. Water and cocaine, that's just not a good combination. A lot of that, we had big fat bags that are deflated now. And my only guess is that the water got to them and that just washed away with the flood.
So let me ask you this, so you've got your alleged drug dealer, you've got your alleged murderer, you've got the criminals, right? You've got certain criminals in jail. What do you do if you can't, what if that cocaine got destroyed? I mean, what do you do? How do you go back and deal with the case?
Well, again, that rests on the judge and the jury. I know that the district attorney has expressed some concern with respect to that, but evidence isn't the only factor in trying a case. There could be witnesses and in some cases ballistics tests or fingerprints that were lifted off guns and things along those lines. So it's all is not lost, even if there was a circumstance where a bag of cocaine, for example, melted away, literally melted away. But it certainly does make it more difficult for the district attorney to prosecute those cases. So what we wanted to do,
all those individuals, Kimberly, that are linked, and we're looking at this unbelievable video, just all the moldy case files in the property intake office.
right.
Are all these individuals that are attached to these cases, are they still in New Orleans jails? Because you and I were talking a little bit about some mutual friends at the NOPD, and some of them said, well, so many of those criminals that have left New Orleans, so it doesn't matter if we have records and evidence or not.
Well, and that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. I believe that many of them are no longer in New Orleans, may not return to New Orleans. But if they do, and as those cases come up, I want to make sure that I can produce that evidence. That's critical. It's critical. It's even critical for cases that have already been tried. People that are interested in appeals, or people that are interested in getting their records expunged, so that they can have a new lease on life. So that evidence is more than just historical records of events. They really represent people's lives, and we're going to do everything we can to restore every article of evidence.
Well, it's pretty incredible. National Archives pitching in to help you out. Kimberly Williamson Butler, Clerk of Criminal Court for Orleans Parish. Quite a job ahead of you, Kimberly. Keep us posted, all right?
Thank you. I will.
All right. Well, the art of talking New Orleans. We'll all be speaking yak by the end of this hour. We'll explain coming up next.
As I said, this is the most popular part, 15-minute break. We'll start 20 after. Does that sound okay? 20 after.